Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Anderson, and I'm an editor over here at Marketing ID. Today with me, we have Jerry Rackley. He is the chief analyst over at Demand Metric, but he's also the author of Marketing Analytics Roadmap. Jerry, it's a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thanks, Brian. I'm glad to get to have this conversation.
Same here, same here. So when it comes to your new book, Marketing Analytics Roadmap, you highlight various different methods, metrics, and tools that marketers are leveraging to enhance their marketing analytics initiatives. But one thing you touched on in particular that was really intriguing to me was the idea of how company culture impacts marketing analytics initiatives. So I think for our first question is, how is company culture acting as a barrier for companies that are looking to maximize the use of their marketing analytics?
Well, I think culture is a great thing to talk about, and it affects everything, but certainly it impacts marketing analytics. And culture, creates lift or drag. And every organization has a culture. Some of them are very intentional about it and manage it really well, and some of them are very oblivious to it, but it's there anyway. It's always a presence. And so it affects analytics because I think you specifically asked when it's a barrier, what does that look like? Well, when you have culture working against your efforts to really be data-driven in a marketing organization, what you see happening are you see people, and marketing in particular, working on what's urgent instead of what's important, and that's a sign that culture is a barrier. Another thing is when you see mistakes in the culture being punished, then culture is obviously a barrier there as well. When you have a culture that basically says, you know what, trust your gut, trust your intuition. And I'm one of the first to say, I like intuition and I like gut feel because a lot of times it's a product of experience and it leads you in a good direction. But if that's all that you're doing and the culture rewards that, then culture is being a barrier. And I think a fourth thing I would say is just simply this: when you're operating in a political environment, and I think all of us who have been in the professional world understand what office politics are about. And so when office politics sort of rule the day, it's going to affect your ability to use marketing analytics and be really data driven. So those are kind of the four big pieces about culture that I think really impact your ability to embrace and use marketing analytics well.
Right, right, and like you mentioned, it's company culture can also have a positive impact on marketing analytics initiatives as well. So ultimately, how can a company culture, how can it be a catalyst for marketing teams that are trying to get the most out of their marketing analytics initiatives?
Sure. Well, I would say I think when a marketing organization is trying to become data driven, the first thing it probably ought to look at and assess is the culture. Just to say, what kind do we have? Is culture going to help us? Is it going to create lift? Or is it going to generate that drag that we were just talking about? And so let's flip around the four things I just listed and talk about what those look like when culture is creating lift instead of drag. And so the first thing you see is when your culture says, we want you to focus on what's important, not on what's urgent. That's when you know that's a really good sign culture is going to help you out, because we all know in marketing, the sort of prototypical marketer, unfortunately, is the marketer with his or her hair on fire, always dealing with these urgent requests from all parts of the organization. And a good culture says, you know what, those are never going to go away, but what we want you to do is focus on what's important and deal with that. So that's kind of the first cultural element. The other really good thing about culture that helps propel you in being data-driven is when the culture says, you're going to make mistakes, so learn from the mistakes. We're not going to punish you. We expect you will, so learn from them, and then let's get better after we've made a mistake. So that's another cultural piece that becomes really important. A third piece, and this is really where the data comes into it, is when the culture says, we like intuition, that's fine, but we trust data. We don't trust intuition, we trust data. And really what's great is when the data and the intuition match up and say the same thing, but often they don't. And so that's when the right kind of culture says, we're going to trust the data. And then the fourth thing, and this kind of is, again, the opposite end of the spectrum of what we were just chatting about in your first question, is when the culture creates an environment of transparency, not one that's political. But when there's a transparency rather that says, we're going to share how we're doing, how we're performing, our results and our metrics. Everyone's going to see them. I'm going to see everyone else's. And that's how we're going to all get better collectively.
Great, great. So when it comes to businesses, specifically marketing organizations, how can these companies, create a more data-focused culture within their organization? What kind of tips, best practices would you share?
Well, I think the first thing I want to do to encourage everyone is talk about, this may not sound like encouragement, but talk about how hard it really is. And I've done some research actually early this year with Laura Patterson of Vision Edge Marketing. We did a very extensive research program. And what we discovered is that there's really only about 21% of marketing organizations that are truly data driven. They are creating value by using analytics for their organization. So it's a minority. So recognize that it's hard, but it's worth pursuing. So what are some tips? That's what you asked me. One is, I think, when you embark on a journey to become more data driven, you have to first make sure that you're focused on the right set of objectives. You never just say, hey, let's do analytics and let's start looking at numbers and data. You always go back to whatever your organization's primary objectives are, and you derive marketing's objectives from those, and then you identify the right metrics for your analytics effort. And so you always have to make sure that your efforts at being data driven never get untethered from the organization's primary objectives. So that's one big thing I would say. The second thing that I would say if you're getting started on this is recognize how far you have to go. If you're going to, for example, decide to run a marathon, you're not going to go out and run 26 miles for your first training session if you haven't run at all. And that's really kind of what it's like with marketing analytics. You're going to start at the beginning. You're going to pick a place where you can have a quick, easy win, demonstrate results, learn what you need to learn about how this stuff all works, and you're just going to build on it over time. So it's always going to be a work in progress. You have to have some patience with yourself, and you have to learn a lot, and you have to figure out where the data is and figure out how to use it. So you have to start small. Don't try to boil the ocean at the beginning. That's my second piece of advice. And then I think my third piece of advice is don't go it alone. I think a lot of marketers, when they say, okay, we're going to really get serious about becoming data-driven, their probably response to that is, okay, let's go, hide away someplace and figure this all out and do it out of sight. You can try that, but you really need allies. So you need to know who your friends are in the organization, and you need support and encouragement, and that support can come from some unlikely places. It's very possible that IT and finance both will be great allies to marketing in their efforts to become data-driven because they can share skills, they can help get you data, they can help develop the business case for what you're trying to do with respect to analytics and being data-driven, and really help smooth the way and help get you where you need to be faster than you could on your own. So you need to know who your friends are. And if I'm honest, I guess I'd say at the same time, you need to know who your enemies are, because not everyone is going to be real enthusiastic about, marketing, doing something that's very data-driven, because it might shatter some long-held myths and beliefs about how things are supposed to happen.
Great stuff, great stuff. Jerry, I really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Brian.
Great. And folks, if you want to learn a little bit more about how data-driven marketers are using these various different methods, metrics, and tools, feel free to check out the link below, and you'll be able to find your own copy of Jerry's book, Marketing Analytics Roadmap. So thank you and have a great rest of the day.